I think it's fair to say we hear a lot about skills as the new currency, and everything else. I mean, what are you seeing around this that's interesting? You talked about, for example, that if you're going to use data, you need to almost develop the culture. You need to, certainly in HR, you need to equip your HR business partners to actually be able to have conversations based on data. And then, as you said, you need to create the culture to make decisions based on it as well. And what are you seeing in those areas?
So I think what I'm seeing is very, very fast and almost brutal, but also impactful and extraordinary transformation of what talent actually means. And it's happening in front of our eyes, right? So throughout our relatively short human history and human evolution of 200 or 300,000 years, for most of that time, talent was mostly physical. If you were fast, strong, had quick reflexes, maybe brave and courageous, then you stood out from a team and from a group, and maybe we followed you because we were better off, being under your wings or so. Relatively recently, after I think, the French Revolution, the main kind of currency in talent, in the world of talent, became expertise and knowledge, right? So that was the rise of kind of the Enlightenment and people who had basically encyclopedic knowledge in an age. Yeah. And it's only until very, very recently that was still the dominant paradigm. I think what we're seeing today is a transformation in the world of talent where intellectual capital, which means experience, expertise, hard skills, the credentials that you still advertise in your CV or your LinkedIn profile, are getting devaluated very quickly because knowledge is accessible by everyone, and it's very, very quickly outdated. And that basically brought about the rise of psychological capital, which is the stuff that we still call soft skills, although very hard to find, right? So what the ideal worker today is somebody who has a lot of potential rather than a lot of expertise and experience. And by potential, we mean that they're curious, they're smart, they're humble, they're self-critical, they're eager to learn, and they're very, very comfortable with the idea that they will end up having to switch careers very quickly, and that, this 6 months, they're an expert in A, but maybe next year they're going to be an expert in B, and so on, right? So it's, I think Google at some point used the term or the metaphor, we hire learning animals, which doesn't sound very nice, but I do think that to be high on learnability, be a curious person and have a hungry mind is the number one ingredient of talent and potential today.
Yeah, it's funny, we had Heather McGowan on the show a few weeks ago, and she was talking about learning as your pension. And certainly I saw some research from IBM around half-life, around the diminishing half-life of skills, but also the time it takes to close the skills gap. I think their research said something like it was like four days average to close the average skill gap in 2014, and that's gone up to about 35 or something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong. 4 years later. So the skills gap's getting wider, it seems, but the need to learn and unlearn and relearn is getting greater as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I even think we are at a point or at a stage where it's not even like you can calculate the distance or the gap between the skills you have and the ones you might need to have in 2 years' time or in 6 months' time. But every day that gap emerges, and every day at every instance you have to close it, because you have to be the ideal worker or the sought after and in demand talent or employee of today is able to deal with new problems and new challenges all the time, and they know how to go about finding out about things they don't know already, right? So that requires the humility to identify knowledge gaps and having the willingness, the passion, the ambition, and the intelligence to quickly be proactive and entrepreneurial in the way you solve problems. So it's a very, very, very significant change from what we meant by talent 20, 30, or 50 years ago.
In this series, we will be speaking to a range of senior leaders who are pushing a data-driven and digital HR agenda. Make sure that you subscribe via your podcast app of choice and also via our YouTube channel for free and regular interviews with the digital HR leaders of the future.